Hello, everybody, and welcome along to Challenge Fatty, and welcome along to Dinner Party Stories. Now, this is a new bit of the Challenge Fatty empire, and if you're new to Challenge Fatty's whole premise is I am a chubby middle-aged man, and I wanted to know if somebody like me or just an average person could do the stuff that you hear the active people you normally know at work gloat about on a Monday at the coffee machine. I'm like, oh yeah, I ran a marathon. Or, oh yeah, I sprinted up Ben Nevis. Or I base jumped off the Shard just for shits and giggles. I wanted to know if a chunky boy like me could actually do those with little or no preparation. So, and what is dinner party stories? Well, it's basically the idea behind this was um, I started doing YouTube the middle of last year, early to middle of last year. And before that, Challenge Fatty was a blog where I did exactly as I've just discussed and said, okay, can I do this? Can I do that? And I wanted to catch up with you, my viewer slash listener, on some of the things I've done in the past. Whether that's triathlons, whether that's karting, running, cycling, traveling, everything. Just general stories. And the pilot episode for this is going to be, as you've seen on the title, a very clickbaity. And then she stared at my crotch. So this goes back to 2012, a time when the prophesied disaster of the Mayan apocalypse didn't happen, and the unprophesied disaster of the Costa Concordia did happen. The Red Bull empire decided to show the fact that they had a better space program than most European countries by just enabling Felix Baumgartner to go into space and then jump for, I don't know, reasons. Anyway, in 2012, I did the British 24-hour kart race. It's a kart race which I've done since 1999. I've done pretty much every year except for a couple, one COVID and one due to injury. And yeah, apart from that, pretty much 20 separate 24-hour races at that place, and it's a event which was unfortunately cut short due to weather. I'm not going to edit this, by the way. You are going to hear me stutter and stammer because if we were in a pub or if we were in a restaurant, we were sat down and we were drinking, I'd be stuttering and stammering all over the place. So get used to it. Anyway, yeah, back in 2012, just to set a wee bit of a scene, Team Benato, which is a team I run in the most loosest terms, had three carts, well, three teams, and we've been doing the event since 2006 as Team Benato. And we did really well. And to the point where we decided to get sponsors. And unfortunately, in 2012, the day before I set off to come up for practice, which was Friday, our sponsor had pulled out. They were supposed to send us the money and sticker sets to put on the carts to show off their logos and liveries and all the rest of it. And they pulled out. And basically, we got up there. We had to use we normally get a nose cone, which you put your livery on. We normally buy those so that we can do that beforehand, but we couldn't do that because the money hadn't come through. The sticker sets hadn't come through, so luckily the entry was paid for all three teams. That was covered. And I was basically funding some of the other stuff which was going on. And I had a couple of connections who I was speaking to a guy called Ivan Charisma who runs Charisma RC across in Hong Kong. He is a hero and a legend. And he, along with my editor, Pete Gray at Radio Racecar, because I was writing for a magazine at the time. They stood up and well, it was mainly Ivan and Pete covered one team, and Ivan said, "I'll sponsor two teams." He sent us some money. Luckily, I had a lot of charisma stickers anyway because I'd been doing racing in the British Micro Championship for charisma, and so we put charisma branding on two of the carts, radio race car on the third cart, and that kind of signified the up and down of what this weekend was going to be like. The race started really well. We had two quick teams who were stretching away. The third team was mid pack because it was the quote unquote junior team, but they excelled and came back through the field. Even though when things started to go pear shaped around midnight, the rain came in, and that track is incredibly difficult in the wet, to a point where a cart had gone off in front of the third team, the radio race car team, or RRCI, and a marshal had come out across a gravel trap to try and help this cart, which was stranded in the gravel, only for a second cart to come barreling into the same gravel trap and take out the marshal. Now, luckily, the radio race car cart came down towards this corner, saw the incident, saw the marshal on the ground, and stopped. There wasn't any flags being waved, and they stopped to help the marshal. Luckily, other marshals arrived to help out as well. In the end, they managed to get the Spirit of a Race award for this because it was heroic, and I constantly remind the people who were in that team just how awesome they were for doing that. About midnight was when everything started to go pear-shaped. I can't really... around then, I was put into the cart about 1 o'clock in the morning. The rain was coming down. I love the wet at Teesside. Well, I did until this year. And we have a little dashboard on the steering wheel, and it gives you your lap time. And every single lap I was going around, I was getting quicker and quicker, and the delta time, which tells you whether you're faster or slower, was reading out that I was getting faster, and I was really starting to enjoy it. I was finding grip out there, and it was great. The Teesside circuit is possibly the longest kart circuit in Europe. I think it's around the 2 kilometer length. I think might be the late 1 kilometers up to a 2. But one of the fastest sections is called the Wiggles. Now, that's on the back end of the circuit. The furthest point to the west of the circuit, there is the mountain, which is quite a big hill for when you're in a cart. And you go up over there, and from the base of the mountain up over the mountain, you then have a roughly 20-25 second flat out in a go-kart section where you are in a straight line tear-arsing down to what are called the Wiggles. Now, the Wiggles is a right, left section which kind of funnels everything down from the width of the track when you're coming down off the mountain is roughly a normal road width, and then it funnels down through this meandering right chicane. I wouldn't want to call it a chicane, it's more of an S. Either which way, each one has an apex curve which gets more and more aggressive by each corner. And the final corner, once it's funneled you down into an almost tunnel of barely 2 cars width, is quite an aggressive curve. And I was coming down through there at absolutely flat out. I figured out how to do it in the wet on slicks, flat out. Also, I thought Um, the other thing about this corner is on the outside of the track as you go, because this once it's gone right, left, right, left, right, left, it then spits you out into the braking zone for a very tight hairpin. So you're going from 70 something miles an hour down to what feels like walking pace in a very short distance with a tyre wall maybe 5 to 10 feet beyond the track limit at the end in front of you. And also to your right, there is grass, and the grass is kind of cambered away from the track. So if you dare stray onto that, it literally sucks you down off the track. It's very hard to get, once you're on there, to get back up onto there, even in the dry, because you're trying to brake at the same time. So you come charging down through the wiggles at 70 miles an hour. I mean, it's onto the anchors to try and slow down for this hairpin. Now, when in 2012, during the rain, I came absolutely terracing down there. As I said, I was getting quicker and quicker. I was getting cockier and cockier. And I snagged the last curb on the left-hand side of the kart. The back axle just nipped the curb and bounced the back end up into the air. I instinctively jumped off the throttle because I knew I'm going to go onto the brakes any second now. And as I did that, the engine didn't slow down, and panic set in. Obviously, by this point, literally, kart had already landed again. My foot was off the throttle, but it was still motoring forwards. I jump on the brakes, but by which time I'm already on the grass, the magnetic grass, the grass which just pulls you off the track. And wet grass, slick tyres, in the rain. I'm sorry, there is no grip there. And as Martin Brundle would say, I am going straight to the scene of the accident. And I went ploughing headfirst into a very substantial and very solid tyre wall. Nose first to start with, on front. I went over the steering wheel. It later turned out that I headbutted the tyre wall as well. But I went nose in to a tyre wall. And then, because it's a tyre wall, it's obviously springy. And it recoiled me round and spun me round. So the back end went in as well. And then that recoiled me out and spat me out, facing forwards, facing towards the apex of the hairpin. And at the time, the adrenaline was surging through me. And I didn't want to waste any time, because that's a key thing in endurance racing. You don't want to waste any time. And any time you do waste, you want to recover. The more you're standing still, the more you're in the pits, the more you're not lapping is time you're wasting. So adrenaline surging through me. I just slap the throttle, get it off the grass, back onto the track, and try and get back up to speed. Now, for somehow, I am still mesmerized by this, but I still managed to do a lap and a half, maybe. Yeah, I managed to finish that lap and then do another lap. Before I decided no, there was a severe lumpiness to the kart. It was bouncing up and down. It wasn't pulling properly, and I thought, no, okay, I'm going to have to admit defeat on this one. I have actually broke it. I'm going to have to take it to the mechanics. Take it into mechanics. Drive into mechanics bay, jump off it, and tell them and try and be as clear and concise to help them of what exactly is wrong. Just went, it's misfiring, it's lumpy, there's massive vibration at speed. And as I say this to the mechanic, I look and turn to the back of the kart. And the karts there are twin engine karts, and they have at the back of each engine, which is lined across the back of the kart, they have the carburetor and the exhaust on top of the engine. And the right-hand engine is missing both the carb and the exhaust, because it had gone that far. When it had impacted the tyre wall, it had gone in, and that impact had ripped things which are bolted in with M4 bolts off the top of the engine. That kind of shows you exactly how hard it was. The back axle was bent. And I walked out the mechanics bay, still bouncing on adrenaline. as they tried to set to work to straighten it out. And the next thing I remember after that was sitting on the ground. I've been told by friends who were with me at the time, I basically just, my legs went from underneath me. And I was then taken to the local hospital, which ironically, two of the organisers were at the hospital attending with the marshal who'd been hit. And I got put into a cubicle. Now, the year before this, one of my other friends had a very similar accident, same corner, but he'd gone across the cart and hurt his knee, and he went to the hospital, and they cut him out of his race suit. So at the time, I was very aware, and I remember thinking, my memory of this is, certain bits of this are crystal clear, some of this are quite vague, but one of the clearest memories I remember of this was when they said, okay, here's a gown, we're going to have to get you changed. I have never got out of a race suit so quickly in my life. Even though I was in a hell of a lot of pain at that point, I got out of a race suit so it didn't have to be cut off me. Got into the gown. I was bleeding. My shoulder was in absolute agony, my right hand shoulder, and my right hip as well. Both of those were really, really painful. My knees hurt, and I was just very uncomfortable. I didn't realise that I'd smacked my head at this point. I only found that out later on. So there I was, lying down on the bed in this cubicle, and I hear the telltale grip of the curtains being open, and in walks the doctor, along with a student nurse, and she's there. And the doctor says, "I hope you don't mind if," I'm guessing, I can't remember her name. Let's call her Emily. "Hope you don't mind if Nurse Emily sits in on this." And I was like, I'm not fussed. At that point, I'm in a lot of pain. He goes, "So can you? We're just going to lie you down, Mr. Chalmers. Can you tell me where the pain is?" I said, "Well, first of all, my hands hurt. My shoulder really hurts. I can't really move it that much. My hip really hurts. And my knees and my ankles." And the doctor goes, okay. Well, let's start at the top. Let's have a look at your shoulder." And as he's focusing on, leans over my shoulder and he's looking at my shoulder and rotating my arm. I'm looking up at him and at Nurse Emily, and I notice she goes pale. And then she stares at my crotch. See, title worked in there. Yeah, she stares at my crotch and literally goes pale, grabs hold of the shoulder of the doctor, and kind of does the eye gesture to sort of like point down at my crotch. And he stops, motionless, and I thought, steady on. I mean, it's not that impressive. I mean, what's going on? And the doctor calmly, responsibly, with an excellent bedside manner, says, "Excuse me, Mr. Chalmers. I don't mean to alarm you. Would you mind if I raised up your gown?" Like, how? Yes. And luckily, I did have some boxes on at that time. But up comes the gown, and goes, "Mr. Chalmers, I'm going to have to remove your boxes." Like, oh, okay, fine. So he very gently tugs down my boxes. And he goes, "Oh, thank God." I'm like, this is not what I want to hear right now. I don't really want to hear, "Oh my God," when you're pulling down my boxes. So, "Well, what's up?" He goes, "It's okay. I thought you were bleeding out your arse." Little did I know that when you have a traumatic injury to your stomach, sometimes you bleed out for your anus. And luckily, that wasn't the case. Basically, when I had gone on one of the impacts, I had gone not only forwards over the steering wheel, but as the cart rotated, my inner thigh had gone against the steering column where there was a bolt, and the bolt had dug into my thigh and cut. Luckily, a couple of inches away from where my femoral artery was, but it dug in and cut on my inner thigh. So I was bleeding through my boxers and out through my crotch onto the bed. I hadn't noticed this when I got changed. I don't know how I didn't notice this, but yeah, I was bleeding out onto the bed. Not bleeding out. I was bleeding onto the bed. And yeah, so it was just, if a matter of fact, oh my God, I thought you were bleeding out for your ass. I'm sure at Middlesbrough he's seen a lot of things over his time, but that was quite refreshing. And then he sort of like checked us. I did the next couple of x-rays and he came back and he went, you're not planning on doing any mountaineering, are you? And I was like, no. He goes, all right, well, I'll give you some cortisone for both joints. But yeah, off you go. So stupidly, with the cortisone on board and with my, I basically partially dislocated my shoulder and my hip, and he popped those back in, which was again fun. And off we go. I go back to the track, feeling a bit pretty frigging groggy, and I basically sat there and watched the team bring back the laps. The car had been repaired. The car had gone out back out again within, I think somebody said 20 minutes or so. They managed to fix the cart and it was back out again and clocking up laps. We weren't in any way of getting a good position with that cart, but the other Charisma cart, did. The other Charisma cart finished third. I, in one of the stupidest things I've ever done, I did the final 2 hours on our cart. Yeah, it was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. He said, "Don't go. You're not planning on doing any mountaineering." When the doctor said that, my brain instantly went, "No, I'm planning on doing some karting." I had, I think it was between, I can't remember if it was 8 or 12 stitches in my inner thigh, cortisone in my hip and my shoulder. And I went out and I did 2 hours on the cart, because back then you could get 2 hours out of the tank, and I was pushing on. Did a good job, brought it home, finished, and went home, as you do. Celebrated, took a team photo, went home. Then, a couple of days later, I blacked out. And I went, I thought, this is a bit weird. Haven't done that before. So I rang up my doctor. I rang up my uncle, who is a doctor. And my uncle is a very calm, very well-mannered, very quietly spoken Edinburgh GP. He also raced in the British Touring Car Championship. But he's very, very mildly spoken. And I've never heard him raise his voice until that point. I explained what I'd done, the crash, all the rest of it. The fact that I'd found a scratch on my visor from where I'd gone across and headbutted the tyre wall. And he absolutely screamed at me. And deservingly so. He told me that he used swear words I've never heard my uncle say. Not that I haven't heard those swear words, it's just I've never heard him say them. And he said, "Get yourself to hospital now. Right now. Get Michelle to drive you. Do not drive. Get yourself to hospital right now. Explain everything you've just explained to me. And tell them that I've sent you. And this is why." Because at the time I didn't realise that I'd hit my head. I never thought to mention this to a doctor in Middlesbrough. So we went there, we had a CAT scan, and they found a wee bit of bruising and stuff. Nobody ever mentioned the word concussion, but I believe there's a possibility I may have been pretty concussed, and some other stuff. So That event shook me to my core, and from then on, I've been very, very careful about stuff. I've still obviously gone back and done the British 24 Hours. Michelle isn't very keen on me doing certain events because of, and we do limit the risk that I put myself through because of being a family bloke with 2 kids and a mortgage. I don't want to have my weekend warriorship jeopardize that. But yeah, that was the big one. That was the big crash of my racing career, and I'm going to hopefully, if you like that story, there are plenty more similar ones. Some slightly more risque, some are slightly more extreme, and I can bring those out in a future dinner party story. If you'd like this so far, use the like button. If not, press the dislike button. Feel free, because it's the algorithm that decides. The algorithm decides whether you see this or not. All hail the algorithm. If also, while you're there, while you're hovering over the dislike button, right next to that, not to the like side, but to the other side, there's a subscribe. Just, tap that while you're there, just for shits and giggles. Anyway, I've been Rob Chalmers. This has been Dinner Party Stories, and I'll see you in the next episode.